Throw away the old rules and think about what would be the right thing to do, what would be the human thing to do. It's never going to be completely equal. But if you think about what would happen if there were just a few of us, how would I behave? How would I act? If I give a wave away, call it karma or just line up good vibes or whatever, I'm going to stoke this person out. I don't need to do 3 more cutbacks on this wave. I really don't need to. I'm going to be seen as a better surfer. I'm going to be more enjoyable to surf with. I'm going to be more respected in the water.
Welcome back or welcome to the Surf Mastery Podcast. I am your host, Michael Frampton, and today's guest is a returning guest, Holly Beck, and we are going to talk about etiquette. It's a timeless conversation in surfing, but has recently come to the forefront on social media because of a few things. There was an article on Surfline about it and on Stab, and of course there has been a recent influx post-COVID of the adult beginner learner. Etiquette is something that we've touched on many episodes, but we've never had an episode all about it. I'm really looking forward to some listener feedback on this conversation and the subject, whether that's via email, mike@surfmastery.com, or just at comments on the Instagram post to this. So as I mentioned, Holly is a returning guest. She first appeared on the podcast back in episode 75. So if you want to learn more about Holly and her backstory, you can go back and listen to that. But to summarize, Holly Beck is a former professional and competitive surfer, and she is currently running the Surf with Amigas surf retreat in Central America. Surfwithamigas.com is the website. You can go and check out what she does down there. There will be links to that website on the show notes. But this podcast episode is just Holly and I, just a raw conversation about surf etiquette. And I would love to hear some feedback from listeners to chime in after you've listened to this conversation. I will come in at the end too and give my summary and thoughts since having done and edited this conversation. But without further ado, I shall fade in my conversation on etiquette with Holly Beck. Let me ask you, here's a question that I've been asking guests recently, which I think ties into the broader topic of what we're going to discuss today. Is surfing a sport or is it an art?
I think it could be either, depending on the participant. I think that for me, when I was a competitive surfer, then it was sport. And now that I'm not a competitive surfer, then for me, it's more of an art. But I think that different people can make that choice and be right. You know, that both answers could be right depending on the person and how they approach it.
Okay.
What do you think?
I agree with that. I think it's I think it's a sport. Obviously, if you're in a surfing competition and you're being judged, you know, it's a sporting competition. And in those situations, surfing is a sport. However, when you were to watch the replay of John surfing his final winning wave, it's pretty hard to argue how artistic and dance-like the way he moves is. And I would hesitate to guess that he's just in the zone at trying to be one with the wave and express himself through surfing, rather than, I got to hit the lip 3 times to get to the beach to score an 8.7 that I need. Maybe sometimes he thinks like that, but I just think the best in the world, they treat competitive surfing like a sport, except when they're actually surfing. When they're actually standing up on the wave, that's when they're performing an art form. They just, all the competitive stuff, all the rules and regulations of paddling around, priority, all that jazz, the sporting stuff seems to sort of it should be forgotten about once you're up on the wave, and then you're an artist, essentially. There's no finish. I
wonder if you could say the same thing about the greats in things that I think most of us would say are a sport, like soccer or football. My son is really into soccer. And so I've been learning about soccer. I didn't play soccer growing up, but we've been watching Messi, videos of Messi and all of, the compilation on YouTube of the amazing goals that he's able to score and the different ways that he's able to do it. And I think when you mentioned John on his winning wave, I kind of had that same thought of like, if you're so great at whatever it is that you're doing and you're in the flow, like the different ways of scoring a goal or even shooting a basket, with the hang time and the style of the way that your arm is, at that point, it's going beyond just, I need to get this ball into the goal or I need to get this ball into the basket. And it's like the flair of how you do it that makes it into an art.
I totally agree. I think Messi is an artist. I think the difference is, though, a football game, the score, if the ball goes in the goal, there's a hard line. You win, like a running race is great. Like there's no arguing. You either won the race or you didn't. It doesn't matter whether the second place looked more beautiful doing it. They still came second. Whereas in surfing, we're almost judged on how artistic we look when we're actually surfing. The fastest surfer doesn't necessarily win. It's the most beautiful way that you surf with the wave that you've been given. So I'd almost argue that the sport of surfing is judged from an artistic perspective, far more similar to gymnastics in the Olympics, for example.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. But I feel like the difference in, well, at least the way that I interpreted your initial question is like how you are approaching it. If there's like a sporting mindset of like my fitness and my training, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to perform a certain, I guess even using the word perform kind of messes it up, but I'm going to achieve a certain set of things versus I'm going to maintain my flexibility so that I can go out and perform my dance with the wave. So maybe it's just, I just noticed that my relationship to surfing has definitely changed. And, 10 years ago, I would answer your question differently than I answer it now. I don't think that surfing has changed. I'm the one that's changed.
Yeah, I guess my argument is that for most of my listeners, if you want to get better at surfing, I think it's better to think of it as an art form rather than a sport, because it sort of takes the competitiveness away from it. Because often when we think of sport, we think of competition, whereas surfing outside of competition, 99% of people listening to this, probably more, have never competed in a surfing competition and have no desire to. However, they do want to get better at surfing. And I like to sort of think of surfing as more like music than it is tennis.
Well, and then I guess you have to ask the question, like, what does it mean to be better at surfing? Is it better because you're able to catch more waves, you're able to ride bigger waves, you're able to perform more advanced maneuvers, or is it because you're able to go out there and connect with the ocean and feel the glide and have fun? Because for some people it might be really good at the first and really bad at the second. And are they really better surfers because they can do airs, but they're getting angry and they're making enemies and everybody in the lineup hates them? Does that make them a better surfer than somebody that's just paddling out and enjoying the experience and connecting with the other surfers and the water and standing up and having a beautiful long ride where they kick out of control of their board? Is that a better surfer?
Well, exactly. And you hit on my point. I think that a lot of people, especially young beginners, the way that they think about surfing is bastardized by the surf industry and the surfing media, where they think, oh, a good surfer is someone who surfs a shortboard and does 3 to the beach. Whereas actually, if you think about surfing as not a sport, but more of an art form, more like music, then you can actually sit down and go, actually, what does good surfing mean to me? And then there's such a broad spectrum of what that means. Maybe it is. Yeah, I do actually. Damn it, I do want to show off and do 3 to beach, and owning that and doing it is going to make you better. Or I think for most of us listening, it's actually, I just maybe surfing a bigger board and catching waves over here away from the crowd that don't peel as much, but I get more of them, and it's just more about me adventure surfing and connecting with the ocean. Actually, maybe that's more getting better at doing that, getting better at surfing that wave over there that no one else surfs, or whatever it is. If you think of surfing as an art form, then you get to choose your genre of surfing and dive into that and decide what it is more, rather than just, I would need to get the latest pop-out shortboard model that so-and-so's riding and the wetsuit that and the clothes or whatever. I just think so many people have been blindsided by the surf industry and the surf media as to what surfing is. And when you change your whole philosophy and define what your own surfing is and what you want out of it, then not only are you going to be better at surfing, you're going to have a better attitude in the water. You're going to be more fun to surf with, blah, 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 which kind of leads us into the etiquette side of things, because I think that ties into it quite nicely. Like if you are literally paddling out at a crowded surf break on a shortboard and you want to just catch lots of waves and pretend that you're John, there's a time and a place to do it. And if you're going to do it at trestles, there's a different etiquette than if you were going to, paddle a longboard out at Noosa on a knee-high windless day. Those are two completely different situations. And I think the etiquette needs to be, I don't think there's any one way of thinking about surf etiquette.
Well, I like what you said about it being specific to the situation and the different spot that you're in, and that etiquette is like there's a general set of like rules, and also there's a lot of gray area, and also the rules change based on the situation.
Definitely. Yep, we can agree on that. You do, this came up because of there's been an article on Stab and Surfline, and then there's been a bit of back and forth through Instagram, some of your posts, and then you reached out to me with an email, and I think we agree in a lot of ways, but I think we also disagree in a lot of ways too. But let's hear some more of your some
call them extreme views. All right, I'll tell you where they came from.
Yeah,
if that's all.
That's okay. What I'm trying to ask.
I grew up and started surfing in the mid '90s in Palos Verdes, California, and Palos Verdes is really well known for having like intense, like old school etiquette. Like if you don't live here, you can't surf here. One of the things that creates the conditions for that is that the waves there are very infrequently good. The waves get amazing. They get world class. There's awesome waves, but you need a really specific type of swell to make them work. So all summer long, it's completely flat. And in the springtime, when you get wind swells, it's junky. So the only time that makes those waves really good is when you get like a strong northwest long period swell. And then there's all of these points that light up. And Palos Verdes is located in between Los Angeles and LA County. It's this little peninsula that sticks out. The freeways are really far away. Nobody's passing through Palos Verdes. You have to go there. And it's also upper middle class location, and along the coast in Palos Verdes, because it's so beautiful and it's right in between LA and Orange County, it's really expensive to live there. So there's a lot of trust fund kids and very wealthy, adults that live there that feel this sense of entitlement and privilege. And also the fact that the waves don't get good very often. When they are good, there's this feeling of like, these are our waves. These are our waves in our backyard that we've waited all year to surf. And we've got to stop the outsiders for coming in, right? This is localism at its peak. And that's what I grew up in. And so when I was young and getting indoctrinated into that, I thought that was the way to do it. And, if you're a Grom, you start at the beaches or you sit on the very inside and you don't get set waves, and you have to like play all the different games of ingratiating yourself to the guys at the top of the pecking order and pay your dues and be out there on the sloppy days and make friends. And then also, it's like a pack of dogs. If the alpha is barking at outsiders and you want to be accepted by the alpha, then you have to also bark at the outsiders. So I got pulled into that pack of thinking that that was the right way to be and that was the cool way to be. And I also want, to claim my share of this limited resource. And so if I saw people from out of town that I didn't know, I was a jerk to them, just like everybody else was, paddling circles around them, dropping in on them, telling them to beat it. Like I had a friend who would, on a crowded day, he would call out and he'd be like, who knows the zip code? If you don't know the zip code, turn and paddle in right now. Right. And so I thought that was normal and that was right. And I defended that. And then I eventually moved to Central America and was surfing very uncrowded spots and kind of started to develop a different perspective. And I started to surf with a big group of women and recognize that just because I lived there, and here's these clients coming in for a week, does it mean that I get more right to waves than they do because I live there? And at first I said, yes, yeah, maybe not my clients. But when I was out surfing this break that is now my new home break, and then, there's the local kids that are true locals. And then there's me who's lived there for 10 years. And then there's the guy from Florida who's been there a week. And so I kind of took that same mindset that said, I deserve more than you from Florida because I live here, and continued it. And then, I have progressed as a human and through the counseling degree and everything else. And I had been teaching to our clients because we teach etiquette, right? I believe that everybody needs to know etiquette. And if I'm teaching surfers how to surf, part of my responsibility as a surf instructor is to teach them etiquette so that I'm not just pushing them into waves, but I'm teaching them to become a surfer. So that means educating them on the history and how to be a surfer in the lineup. And I used to teach, okay, here it is, the surfer closest to the breaking part of the wave has priority. And as you paddle out, you make sure to paddle around into the channel if you can. And if you're paddling out and somebody's on the wave, it's your job to get out of the way and sacrifice yourself to the whitewash and don't drop in and surf a spot that's appropriate to your ability level. And all of the basic rules that I think us as surfers don't argue about. Like we all agree that those are the rules of surfing. And then I used to say too, like, we are not all equal. There's the guy who has been surfing here before you were born. There's the person who is an exceptional surfer that's lived there a long time. And then there's you as the visiting advanced beginner or beginner on a longboard, and you're not all equal. If you all paddle out at the same time and the set wave comes, probably the guy who's been surfing here before you're born is going to take the first good wave. And then the aspiring pro surfer is going to take the next good wave. And then it's your turn. And that was what I would teach. And I started to adjust my mindset. And I got to give credit where it's due. Part of it was from a good friend of mine who is a woman of color. And she had created this organization, co-founded an organization called Color the Water that was all about taking people from communities that traditionally didn't have access to surfing and help bring them into surfing. And she had this, like, we'll call it like woke, but like, evolved vision of equality that I didn't agree with. Because I was like, no, if you don't live here and you're a beginner, or, you haven't grown up there, then you need to give extra respect to the locals. And we got in these big arguments. And over time, I started to change my mindset because a lot of the things that she was saying was like, why is it that just because, let's use me as an example, I came from a privileged background of having the opportunity to grow up in this beautiful surfing paradise. And I came from a family with money. So I didn't have to work when I was I did work in high school, but like not in the sense that stopped me from going to the beach. I didn't have to like help provide for my family. And then I was able to continue to live that lifestyle that was able to spend a lot of time to become a good surfer and to spend a lot of time at a certain break. That was a lot of privilege and luck that I had. And why does that make me more worthy of set waves? Like it shouldn't, right? The ocean is for everyone. So if I paddle out into the water just because I grew up surfing and I live close to this break, if somebody didn't grow up by the beach, they grew up inland and they've moved to the coast and they have to work to support their family. So they only get to surf one day a week. So they're still, learning to surf. Why does that person not have a right to catch a set wave? And like, I didn't have a good answer for that. Do you?
The way that you grew up, in surfing partly answers it. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I do think it's specific to where you're surfing. Like this person, if this person took that attitude out to a head high day at First Point Malibu.
Well, what's the attitude? What's the attitude?
What do you mean?
You said if this person takes that attitude, what attitude? Define the attitude.
Thinking that they should just get their turn because they paddled out at a surf spot and that everyone should have turns. Is that what you're sort of getting at?
I think that's what we're getting at. But let's remove Malibu or Lanada Bay from it, and let's just think about average surf spot. Any surf spot, random surf spot, not famous, intense. We're not talking about Pipeline or Malibu or Raglan. We're just talking about a beach break, crappy beach break. And 3 of us are going surfing, and one of us lives there, and one of us is a pro surfer, and one of us they're capable of surfing those waves. I'm not saying somebody in their first day ever that's going to be a danger to anyone. I think a lot of times in this conversation, the argument becomes, you're advocating for beginners at the peak? No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we're all capable surfers, but one of us has been surfing at that spot since before we were born. And the other one has been surfing there for 10 years. And somebody else, it's maybe their first time there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in that situation, yes, I see what you're saying. Like if we all 3 went out surfing together at a spot, and there's enough waves for us to take turns and still get our fix, and each person is going to respect each other as from a human level, not just a surfing level. That sounds awesome, and in that situation, I agree with you. However, during that same surf, because I've been surfing there all my life, and I see let's say it's Janet's turn, and it's the first time she's a capable surfer, but it's the first time she's surfed there, and we've been sharing waves all the time. But I see something on the horizon that indicates to me, there's a rogue set coming. I know where these ones break. And I paddle out. It's her turn. And I paddle out a little bit further. She follows me. But my experience out at this break has told me, there's a rogue wave that's going to break there. I don't care if it's her turn. This is my experience coming through. I'm taking that wave no matter what. That's where we get into the nuance because I'm more competent at that break. I understand that wave more because I've spent more time out there. I think I should be able to catch that wave of the day and not necessarily give it to her unless I felt generous in the time and I wanted her to catch that wave because I wanted to share the stoke. Maybe I'm a little bit older and more mature and I've had my fix for today. So I think there's a lot of nuance there, and that decision was like, do I use my experience as a surfer in this break to get the best wave of the day, or do I share it with someone else not just because it's their turn, but maybe it's a nice thing to do in the moment? That's where I think the nuance exists in this situation. However, there's not many situations like that. Usually when you go surfing, no matter where you go, whether it's First Point Malibu or some closeout beach, so in between there and Trestles or anywhere along the coast, there's people everywhere, and it's so hard to get away from people. And I would say most people under 45 have the old school mentality of surfing. So you're in this sort of gray area of like, do I be nice here? No one else is taking turns. Why should I?
Well, that's the problem. And I think that is where it comes in. And to go back to your example, the local that is a good surfer that knows that break is going to get more waves. And you probably will get the best wave of the day that comes in. And as you should. That is your benefit. That is your reward for having put that time in and studied that spot, right? So I'm not saying that if there's 3 of you, you should all have the exact same number of waves. My point would be that you see that lump coming and you know where it's going to be, and you paddle over and maybe she follows you, but you've initiated it and you've taken it. Like, I think that's fine. The problem is that if you take it here and then she goes, okay, right, I've noticed, I'm learning from him and I'm noticing that there might be a good one there. And she paddles over it. There's not a second wave in the set, unfortunately, but she sits there and waits. And you go, oh, right, she's kind of in my spot, but I'm going to paddle back around her and sit a little deeper. That way, the next one that comes, I'm going to take that one too, because that's my right as a local at this spot, because that is the attitude that I see happen. So I agree with your nuance. I think that there is nuance, and it does break down when too many people are fighting. Right. So, but I think it's important to start with, what would we do if there were just a few of us? What would be the right thing to do? Throw away the old rules and think about what would be the right thing to do. What would be the human thing to do? It's never going to be completely equal. But if you think about what would happen if there were just a few of us, how would I behave? How would I act? What, you know how it is when just like you and your friends go surfing? Like if you do get one of those lucky days where there's just 4 or 5 of you and you're cheering for each other. And yeah, maybe somebody catches a few more than others. It just happens to be in the flow and those waves just come right to them. You know, but you're going to recognize, if you're out surfing with your friends, right? You're going to recognize, ooh, I've kind of gotten really lucky and I've just got 3 good ones in a row. And even though this other good one is kind of coming right to me, I notice my friend hasn't had one. So you're going to most likely back off and be like, go, this one's yours, right? Like that's how you would behave in a small group of surfers that you knew, or even a smaller group of surfers that you didn't know. Like most humans are going to respond like that. So my point is, if we were teaching that as the right way to do it, even in a giant group of surfers at Malibu, if that was the norm, then I feel like surfing culture would change a little bit. And instead, what I've noticed is that as it gets more crowded, people are holding even tighter to the old ways. And also they just don't know. So part of what has made me think about this more lately, yes, that conversation with my friend kind of opened my eyes to, wow, I have experienced a lot of privilege and maybe I should be using my privilege to be nicer in the water instead of just putting the blinders on. But lately I've been surfing a point break that used to be a secret spot that now is becoming more and more known and more crowded. And I've been frustrated by it. There's like a top of the point where like the very tippy top where all the aggressive surfers paddle each other too deep to be the deepest. But the actual best part of the wave, in my experience, is a little wider. Like the ones I sit a little further down the point, and the waves that swing wide, the way that they break on the point is actually where I prefer to sit. So I generally sit there. And so I watch the aggressive surfers do laps. And there was this one day, there was this surfer, he was kind of darker skinned, but it wasn't obvious that he was local. I'm in Costa Rica, so it wasn't obvious that he was a local Costa Rican, but he did have a little darker skin and he was wearing these bright red board shorts, and I'd never seen him before. And I spent a lot of time at this break, so I feel like I know most of the true locals. I'd never seen him before, and he was just doing laps. He was a good surfer, and he would catch a set wave, he would catch a little wave. It wasn't like he was just waiting for the best waves of the day. He was paddling for any wave he could catch, and he was riding them and beelining it straight back to the top of the point and going again. And he was really irritating. A lot of the people in the water were irritated with this guy. And some people were grumbling to each other, but no one was really saying anything. And probably third day of seeing him during this swell, I had a friend paddle out, a girl on a longboard. She was having a hard day. She just needed to get a couple waves. We started chatting. We sort of floated down to the very bottom of the wave. And she was like, I'm so frustrated. I just need a wave. And I see red shorts up and riding again. And he has already traversed, like 50 meters. This is a real long point break. We're at the very, very end of the wave where most people just kick out anyways. She's on a longboard and I tell her, oh, it's just red shorts. Go, you go, drop in on it. Which, may not have been the right thing to do. But in that moment, I'm trying to look out for my friend. This guy's not caring about anyone else. So I tell her to go. She's like, really, the guy? And I'm like, don't worry. He's been taking too many. Everybody's annoyed with this guy. So she drops in on him. And he is racing down the line. And what most, I think, of us would have done would have been like, and kicked out. Whatever. I've had 100 waves today. Let the girl on the longboard go. But he didn't. He forced it and yelled at her, and she got flustered and she fell off. And I'm like, oh my God, I've caused this. So I'm sitting there preparing my apology. I'm thinking to myself, when he paddles back out, I'm going to apologize to him and I'm going to say, hey, that was my fault. I'm so sorry. I told my friend to go, but this is why. I've noticed that you've been catching a ton of waves. Maybe you should let a few go. But before I got a chance to say that to him, he paddles up angrily. And my friend, who's already had a bad day, she just releases her anger on him. And instead of apologizing, she goes, I heard that you've been taking all the waves, and that's not cool. And now we're all yelling at each other. Just the opposite of the vibe I'm trying to create in the water. But I got kind of sucked in, and he doesn't understand because in his mind, he got dropped in on and yelled at. And now I'm, instead of calmly apologizing and having an opening to this conversation, I'm now yelling back at him. And we have this whole thing, and he paddles away. And now all three of us and the bystanders in the water, everybody's nervous system is activated. And I was like, ugh. And eventually he paddled over to another one of our friends and said, what? I don't understand what just happened. And so she told me that. So I paddled up to him, and in a much calmer way, I explained what happened. And he told me he thought he was following the rules. He was like, but I was deepest. So that means I have priority. And that was the realization that, everybody in the water is annoyed with this guy, but he doesn't realize it because in his mind, he is 100% justified. He's following the rules. And, we explained, pura vida, high five, we respected each other's surfing. And I think it was only because I am a very competent surfer that he would even hear me out, because that is surfing, right? We, as surfers, respect other talented surfers. And, he commented like he had seen me catching waves. And I said, yeah, I also respect your surfing, so we can have this conversation. And a few days later, I saw a very similar thing happen with a beginner surfer. This guy could barely surf, but he was doing the same thing. He was paddling up to the top of the point. He was going on waves. He was falling. He was doing it over again. And I went to him and had a nice conversation. I was like, hey, I noticed you're catching a lot of waves and even you're not dropping on people, but like dropping in too deep, like he was taking waves that if he had let them go, other surfers could ride. So he was blocking people from catching waves in that way. And I'm like, but, you should really sit down the way or let some waves go. And he's like, but I was deepest. And so that is what made me realize that this is the problem, is that when we, as surfer culture, are having these conversations, we're telling people, these are the rules. Closest to the breaking part has priority. Don't drop in, paddle around. But there's no mention of, and look out for other surfers. Keep in mind that just because you can sit deepest and take waves, there's more to it. And soon after I'd been having these conversations, I was scrolling Instagram, as you do, and I saw that, I think it was Surfline, had this really cool feature that they had clearly invested money in, and there was these animated graphics, and it was all like the rules of surfing. And I was so interested. So what are they going to have? And it was all of those rules. It was like surf at a spot appropriate to your level, all the things that we already listed. No mention of, and look out for the other surfers and take turns. And just because you're deepest doesn't mean that you should have priority forever. Like similar to I listened to your podcast of Laird, when you told the story of Laird,
yeah,
where it was like, Laird thinks he's Laird, so he gets to go, and it's like, why aren't we having this conversation more, that it isn't just if you're the best surfer and you can take off the deepest, that you get more waves.
Yeah, it's so nuanced. And to take that Laird story, I think the Laird story and your story of red shorts are quite similar in a way. Do you know, the only reason that Laird was getting so many waves off me is because I let him. And the only reason red shorts was doing what he did is because he was acting like a kook and no one was pulling him up on it. Now, until you calmly spoke to him and he's like, oh, So I describe a kook as someone who's with a lack of awareness. It doesn't matter whether you're a good surfer or not. If you're out there just running rings around everyone else and with a complete lack of awareness, just think, just because I can drop in, more than earlier than you, I get all the waves. You're acting like a kook, and it's up to one of the elders. Now, maybe it's one of the elders drops in on him, pushes him deep, and then the guy comes at him and starts yelling at him, and he just looks him in the eye and says, "Nah, man, you're gone in. That's the old school way of doing it, and that's how it used to get sorted out." But nowadays, it's more like, actually, we'll let you vent and calm down, and then I'm going to have a logical conversation with you. And if you're still going to act like that, well, you know what? You're going to get dropped in on, and everyone's on my side. And I think so. In the situation with Laird, I didn't speak up early enough. And I mean, of course, part of it's Laird is who Laird is because of what Laird does. That's part of it too. But at the same time, when I did stick up for myself, he kind of more appreciated it than anything else. And just like with Red Shorts guy, I'm assuming he did change his attitude, or he paddled in that day, or I mean, what have you seen him since? Like, what's the follow on?
No, I never saw him again. It ended up being the last day of his trip. He turned out to be Costa Rican, which is something he made sure to let me know. But he lived in a different part of Costa Rica. And when we finally had that conversation, it was like at the very end of this, we'd both gone in. We're both on the beach and had the conversation on the beach. So I never got a chance, but I hope that he thought about it, because that was the realization, was that to me, it seemed like he just didn't realize. I think Laird realizes, Laird knows, right? I want to think that Laird knows that it would be nicer to share waves, but because he's Laird, nobody's going to say anything. Where in this case, both Red Shorts and the beginner guy that I mentioned, they just literally didn't know. They looked at me like there was they were shocked that I was calling them out, because they thought they were in the right. Because even when you go to a surf break and you see the signs now that they have at places that are the rules of surfing, again, the rules are surfer deepest and don't drop in. And that's the conversation that I want to have. I recognize that there's nuance, and you get to a certain level of a certain number of people in the water, and it just it becomes chaos. But I wish that there was more conversation around, and let's look out for each other in the water, because sometimes I think that person that is catching so many waves, obviously everybody's different, but a lot of times they think that they're crushing it. They think they're showing off. They think that the other surfers in the water are in awe of all the waves they're catching and how they're ripping. And if we as a surfing culture were adjusting what we felt like was good surfing, and that included was pleasant to surf with, then I think that the lineup would be nicer for everyone. And then the shredder, because that's how I try to surf now, don't get me wrong. I like to be the best surfer in the water when I'm having a good day. And I love it when I do a big turn and someone comments, and I love it when I get the best set wave of the day. I still have that, but I have now recognized that if I have that, but everybody's annoyed with me, then I'm not actually the best surfer in the water. And that's the part that I wish was more a part of surf culture, because I think that still there are people, a lot of them, that believe that part of being the best surfer in the water is also getting the most or the best waves. And it's aside from just their enjoyment of those waves, but they actually think that is them, winning the surf session. Yeah.
And I think pre-CCTV, that person would have been shown the door through old school passive aggressive localism, which I agree with you.
But not if they were local.
No, it depends. It depends on who he's snaking. If he's out, if there's a bunch of plumbers that want to get their 3 waves before work, and they're older than him, well, he's not going to get away with it back in the day. Nowadays with CCTV, no one wants to say anything. No one wants conflict. People just ignore these sorts of people and just Laird is going to go out and catch as many waves as Laird can catch. There's no etiquette in Laird's mind. It's a dog eat dog world. I'm the best. It's a hierarchy of confidence. I'm dropping in deepest. I'm on a stand-up foil board. I don't give a shit until someone looks him in the eye and says something to him and says, actually, then Laird might go, oh, you know what? You made the effort to actually say something to me and make a conversation and prove to me that you can catch a wave on the peak. Yeah, okay, we'll go wave for wave now. I think the problem in the culture is no one says anything. Therefore, narcissistic F-wits and kooks like Red Shorts guy and Laird Hamilton will do whatever they want to catch as many waves as they can. Now, I agree. I don't think you should go dropping in on someone and pushing them into the reef and being passive-aggressive about it, but neither should you just say nothing. Paddle up to him, look him in the eye. If he's not willing to have a conversation, he keeps doing what he's doing, well, hey, maybe then drop in on him because he's not listening. I think I agree with you. I just think that the surfing has no rules. I think that's the beauty about surfing. But yes, there are ethical practices to make sure that lineups are safe. Because at the end of the day, it's a safety issue, right? If someone's going to be like that, people are going to get frustrated. They're going to make bad decisions. They're going to drop in on him on a longboard. Someone's going to get hurt, whether it's a wave of consequence or not. So it does come back to a safety issue. So if someone like Red Shorts is being a dick at a surf break where there's no real shallow reef or anything, the consequences are people are going to get frustrated with him and a longboard's going to get somewhere. So maybe it's up to one of the elders to actually pull this guy aside and say, hey, look, dude, you're acting. This is the way you're acting. This is the way people in the lineup are seeing you. Just letting you know, yes, you're a good surfer. You can paddle deeper than everyone else, but this is how people are experiencing you. Just
right.
to,
and I think that having these conversations helps spread that idea, because I think that a lot of people, like in this particular case, there's not really elders at this spot, like this is the spot that kind of used to be a secret spot. And now a lot of people that surf there, like they're just that doesn't really, like, I guess I'm the elder in this case. Like I find myself at this spot a lot. Like, I don't feel like I normally would count as an elder, but I'm kind of filling that role as someone that surfs there a long time, has the surfing skill to kind of back it up and feels like I can speak up. But there's plenty of other people in the water who surf there a lot longer than this guy, but I think they don't feel empowered to stick up because that isn't what they've been taught. Like, I think it goes back to this thing, like to popularize the idea that if someone is taking too many waves, like that isn't okay. Like, we should be taking turns. And that doesn't mean that the actual, old man that's been surfing there forever, that's 70 years old, that doesn't catch that many waves, and he's finally going to go and not look. Of course, I'm going to say, yeah, you go. There's some element of, respecting these certain individuals, but with the idea that the respect goes both ways. Right. I think a lot of times also when I have this conversation, or at least when I was having it on the keyboard through Instagram, and I was getting so frustrated because I couldn't actually have a conversation, a lot of the keyboard warriors were saying, if people sitting on the shoulder want to catch more waves, they should just sit deeper. And I feel like that goes against it, because it's like, if at this break, again, as I say, like there's the steeper top takeoff, and then it's a really long wave with the nice sloping shoulder. And there are a lot of kind of advanced beginners or lower intermediate surfers that ride fishes and mid-lengths and even longboards sitting at this break. And if the only way to tell them the only way they can catch a wave is by being deepest, then that invites all of them to have to go sit at the top of the point. But they don't want to sit at the top of the point. And if we said, you on the longboard that's really better off sitting on the shoulder, the only way that you can get in position to have your turn come up is to sit at the top of the point, that's actually what's endangering people. So the better practice is for the surfers at the top of the point to occasionally let some waves go. Have it not always be the surfer at the very top of the point's priority just because they're capable of sitting deepest, because the alternative is to have these surfers have to sit further up. And then they're not as competent. And if they do wipe out, they're right in the thick of things. Like, I would rather that surfer sit further down the shoulder. And after I've had a few waves, and here I am on another wave, and I see this beginner surfer on the shoulder that still hasn't had one, like, I should kick out and be like, you go. I'm not going to do it on the very best wave that comes in, right? But like, it should be their turn. It should be their priority. And I feel like that's, you don't agree. How are they ever going to be good enough to sit at the top of the point if they're never allowed to catch a wave?
Yeah, no, I see your point of view. However, it makes me think of, I haven't surfed in this place. I haven't surfed in this culture. It's hard for me to comment. So let me give you I surfed First Point Malibu a lot. And nowadays, there's a handful of surf instructors on the inside pushing kooks into wave. Kooks, like people with lack of awareness, people there for the tourist experience. Quite frankly, people that should be practicing how to stand up on a surfboard in the whitewash at Zuma Beach where there's no one else around. Now, if I spend an hour sitting on the peak waiting for my turn for a set wave at Malibu First Point, and I finally get one of these waves, and I manage to surf it most of the way through, and at the end of the section, I want to finish off with a nice nose ride and glide out, but no, so-and-so's pushing soft top in my way. I should have been allowed to do 2 more turns on that wave, and you should actually be at a different break learning how, even though this wave is catchable here, it's still actually quite a rippable wave for good surfers. Just because it's harder to catch further up doesn't mean that you get to catch the last part of the wave. So
I agree with you 100%. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, let's say I'm sure you're very capable of sitting steep and deep in Malibu. And Malibu is maybe not the best example, but let's just use it. I know how Malibu, sitting at the top, it can be a little steeper, and then it's a little easier to get in on the shoulder, right? And we're not talking about like the A+ day where all the pros are out and it's crazy. Just an average day at Malibu. And I'm not talking about the beginner on the soft top getting pushed in by an instructor. We're not talking about that guy. I'm talking about the maybe one level down in skill from you, however you would define that. Not as good as you, but like aspiring to be as good as you, almost as good as you. Not quite as good at taking off steep and deep, not quite as able to sit late underneath all the crowd, a little bit more nervous about sitting there, wants to sit a little further over to have a little bit more time on their pop-up, but they're capable of getting up and riding down the wave without such a pressure situation. Mm-hmm. It's more like that person. It's that person that is also paying their dues, is also waiting their turn, has watched you get a few good ones. Okay, you've been sitting for an hour and you haven't had one. No, please don't give your wave away for this person. But I'm talking after you've had a few and everyone else sitting with you has had a few. And you've paddled past this person that's just sitting like 10 feet over, 15 feet over, because they just don't have the confidence, the experience to sit as steep and deep. That's the person I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. I've been that person. Yep. I'm there. There's no way when I was that person, there's no part of me that would paddle out to halfway up the point at First Point Malibu and expect someone to pull off after having caught the wave at the peak and give me a wave. No, I'm there to get the scraps. I'm there to get the wide sets that do come through that the guys sitting at the point don't want. And I will sit up into the point and I will watch them and I'll learn from them and I'll put hours upon hours into that wave to learn how that wave breaks
now you've gotten a little closer, and that's good.
Yep.
Good job doing that. And now you've gotten a little closer, right? And the idea that what if there's a guy that can take off 4 feet deeper than you, and every single time he paddles past you, every time.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I live here. I live right here on the point.
That's not why, but he's just more skillful and knows the wave better.
Or maybe you guys are equal. Maybe he's actually an equal surfer, but the fact that he lives there gives him a certain amount of entitlement and knows everyone else in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be more enjoyable for you if he didn't paddle past you every single time
So
and just said, fist, I'm going?
I also lived in Sydney, and I used to surf a slab, like quite a difficult wave, and the takeoff zone is very small. Only about 5 people can even sit there. So, and I spent, gosh, I surfed there for hours every single day for at least a year before I was allowed to get a set wave. And there is no part of me that thought, oh my God, I wish you had just given me a turn, or, you know what I mean? Now, partly because it's a safety issue. It's like they knew, whether consciously or not, I didn't have the skill to take off right at the deepest part of the wave, because I might have got dragged along the reef. And I certainly wasn't a local. And so I got the scraps and I caught the ones on the shoulders for years. And then every now and then I paddle out early in the morning and there's no one out. And I got to take a few from the takeoff point. And I worked my way up. So I've been in these situations, and I can understand why people new to surfing think that, oh no, shouldn't I just be allowed a turn? How else am I going to get good at taking off deep unless you give me a turn at doing it? So I see your point, and I see newcomers coming at this from this perspective, but I also see the tradition, and some locals take it to the extreme and aren't necessarily doing it for reasons of safety and culture and ethics and stuff. They just want their waves. But we also have to deal with those people, because they're not going to change their ways either. So,
well, I think sometimes it's hard to, when we've grown up in this culture and we, like, it's like that. I hear you, and I can relate to the fact that I paid my dues. Now you have to pay your dues. And it's almost like that, the whole culture of like hazing, like the seniors beat up on the freshmen, and then those freshmen grow up and be seniors, and then they beat up on the freshmen, and it just like the cycle. Or I know in the fire service, my partner is a retired firefighter, and talks about like in the fire service, it's the same way. Like the young guys have to do the grunt jobs because that is how it's always been. But if you take a moment to separate from that and think, but should it be that way? It's like, yes, we had to deal with that. We got yelled at and kept on the inside and forced to sit on the shoulder, and now because we survived through that and got to the other side, now we're going to expect that everybody else has to do it too. Like, I get that, but it's just the question of, and I think again, like when you're talking about pipeline or this slab or First Point Malibu, it's a harder conversation to have. But what I see is that even at inconsequential waves, and we're not talking about like the beginner getting pushed in on the soft top. I agree with that too. But what I'm talking about is the more like the middle ground, the average surf session, the similar in ability levels, but maybe this one's a little better than that one. And it still happens. There's still this idea that like, if I surf better than you, or if I'm more from this spot, then I get more. And I just don't think that it's like, you go to the grocery store and you wait in line, and even if it's really crowded and there's only one checkout counter for like so many grocery shoppers, like nobody's expecting that if you live next door to the grocery store, or you've been checking out at that grocery store for 20 years, that you get to cut the line, and it's like, why in surfing do we decide that if you're really good at grocery shopping and you live right next door and you've been shopping at that grocery store since you were a little tiny kid, that you get to go to the front of the line? And nope, sorry, just got to pay your dues. And then one day when you put in the time, you'll get to where I am. And I understand when it's a safety issue, 100%. Agree. And yes, a beginner that should be riding whitewash should not be taken to the top of the point. I see that at this wave too. I see surf instructor, we don't bring our clients to the top of the point. We have them sit at the bottom of the point because they don't need to be riding those waves. But if we get a guest that is a competent surfer that knows how to surf, we're not pushing them in, we're just sort of guiding or coaching them, then they should be able to go out, to show respect, to wait their turn, and then when they've done all those things and the set wave comes, not have somebody that's lived there longer back paddle them or drop in on them or tell them that they should be sitting down the beach just because they're not from there. And I feel like whenever we have this conversation, it always goes to the extremes. And in the extreme, I agree with you. But just to start moving in that direction, because even in the extremes, if I think that if part of culture, surfing culture, was this idea that if we're all catching waves, the lineup is a healthier, happier place. And yeah, if you are being dangerous, then please go down the line. But like, if we're all out there together, then the locals and the better surfers, they're gonna get more waves. They're gonna get more set waves. But that doesn't mean that they have more right to those set waves. Like, the other person should have the opportunity to try for a set wave. And if they fall, they fall. That's okay. That was their turn. There's no such thing as a wasted wave. Whether I caught the wave and rode it all the way to the beach, or I caught the wave and blew my pop-up and fell, that was my turn. I get to do whatever I want with my turn. If I'm riding a finless board and I blow it, that's...
But the irony there is, depending on the break, but in a lot of places, if you stuff up your turn, you don't get another turn. Not that day anyway. I see what you're saying in terms of the... I don't disagree with you, but it's so hard for me to comment having never surfed this specific place.
And I'm just using this spot as an example. Like, today I surfed a whatever beach break right out front, but I noticed the same factors at play. The locals that all knew each other, that are speaking to each other in Spanish, and they see me as the blonde girl, and they think that I don't live here and I don't speak Spanish, and they paddle straight past me to the top of the point. You know, I'm sitting there waiting for it, not the point, the peak where I'm at a beach break. I'm sitting here waiting for my wave. I know exactly the wave I'm looking for. I know how to surf. And the guy just paddles right around the side of me, you know, and I'm just like, you didn't need to do that. We're at a beach break. It's not even very good. There's plenty of waves coming in. Like, just because you live here, you don't need to assert your dominance and paddle around the other side of me.
Yep. Yeah. No, I do agree with you. It's just so nuanced and so, I mean, surfing has a hierarchy of competence. There's no, and yeah, I'm using extreme waves like Malibu and Pipeline and we all always seem to go there. But I think sometimes when you're trying to make a point, it's good to talk about the extremes, because what's on the other side of it, like, okay, let's say go to Uluwatu, and there's an 18-second swell coming in. And have you surfed? I'm assuming you've surfed Uluwatu before.
Yeah, not a ton, but I have.
But even just walking down the stairs to get to paddle out is tough. But the amount of people that I saw out surfing Uluwatu on soft tops and just having no idea what they're doing, and there's locals up on the cliff whistling at them because they've gone too far and they come reef cuts. It's just like, I can see why, like, if you're a good Aussie surfer and you want to go to Uluwatu to surf an 18-second swell, and then you try and catch one of these crazy waves and there's just a bunch of people flailing in front of you, it's really frustrating. Can they manage to catch one of these waves and ride along? Yeah, sure they can, but they're putting themselves and other people at risk in doing it. So when we see articles coming at it from the other extreme on Stab, where Aussie surfers are sick of these tourist kooks getting in the way and hurting themselves, and you see that's another extreme, right? People are taking this entitlement. Again, it's my turn.
But that's not what we're talking about.
No, I know, but it does feed into it a little bit, because you can see if you've
always based on the idea that you are capable of surfing this spot. If you're a beginner, and yeah, you could take off on a wave and go straight, but like, you're dangerous to yourself and others, you shouldn't be out there. I'm not saying that. But why the extremes, I agree with you 100%.
But that's what I'm saying, is that a wave like Uluwatu is a very tricky takeoff spot.
Yeah.
You can sit a bit further down and get into one of those waves a lot easier. But if someone has put the time and effort in to become a surfer good enough to take off at the spot at Uluwatu and they finally get one and they get barreled and they come out and they're like, come out to the softer part of the wave and they want to rip a few turns as well. And then there's some person, oh, it's my turn to go because this is the easier part of the wave. I would say to that person, you're surfing the wrong spot. If you can't take off at the deepest, gnarliest part of that point break that peels all the way through, go somewhere else. So if I'm a local and I've negotiated the barrel section of a point break, and yes, it sections, but I want to do some cutbacks as well on that wave, and someone thinks, oh, but it's my turn. First of all, I'm surfing 50 meters up the line. I don't know whether you've just caught 8 waves or not. I don't know whether it's your turn or not. So whilst I see it's frustrating for the beginner intermediate to sit on the shoulder and catch some good waves at a point break, I'm also thinking, shit, maybe you should be at a point break where it's not as tricky to negotiate, or at a beach break practicing to get good enough to actually sit closer to the point, maybe not to fight for the set waves right at the point, but to at least be seen to be competent by that group that are doing it. So maybe they will, okay, that's not a great set wave. You go on the shoulder. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, and I agree with you. And I agree. And that's where I feel like there's so much nuance, because what I'm saying is, yeah, you're the guy and you've gotten the sick barrel and the wave is still going and you want to do like 5-run house cutbacks. You should absolutely do that. But maybe on the next wave that you get, you come out of the barrel and now you're like, you know what? I just rode that last one all the way to the beach and did 5 cutbacks. But actually the part of the wave I'm enjoying the most is the top with the barrel. And I could do 5 more cutbacks on this wave again, but I also see this longboarder really wanting to have one. And you know what? I'm just going to kick out and let them go. It's not because you have to. It's because that is what's actually going to make you a better surfer in the water. And the longboarder paddles back out and you've made they got this best wave of their trip, right? You're not going to do it every single time. And you are 100% entitled to ride that wave all the way through. But I think, again, like it's just the guy that's done the barrel and wants to do the cutbacks, he doesn't need to do that on 15 waves, right? But like, that's not what we're teaching. We're teaching them, yeah, I'm the guy. And I can do that on every single wave because I have more right to surfing than you. Because I'm a better surfer and I live here and you're a danger, go somewhere else. And I feel like it might not be that person's fault. Like they might be there with their better surfing partner who's also up at the top of the wave. They would love to go somewhere else. They don't want to be there, but for whatever reason, this is where they are. This is where they happen to be. And they're trying their best to stay out of their way. They don't want to hurt you. They don't want to mess up your wave. And I think that's the conversation. And it is so nuanced, because I don't think that they have the right to drop in on you just because it's their turn. I'm not saying that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if I, as the good surfer, have now changed my mindset, believe me, I want to go out there and get mine. I'm a busy mom. I don't get to surf as much as I used to. I have sessions when I go out there and I just need to get a couple waves and I'm going to go get those waves. But after I've had a couple, I'm way more likely with this change of mindset to be like, if I give a wave away, like call it karma or just line up good vibes or whatever, like I'm going to stoke this person out. I don't need to do 3 more cutbacks on this wave. I really don't need to. I'm going to be seen as a better surfer. I'm going to be more enjoyable to surf with. I'm going to be more respected in the water if I do kick out of this one. If I go to paddle for wave, I'm deepest. It's a fun shoulder high wave, but here's this competent, lesser skilled surfer sitting nearby that I know I've paddled around 3 times already because they can't sit as deep. They don't want to sit as deep. Like maybe I am just going to let this wave go. I don't need it. I don't have to do that. That's the choice I'm making, but that's the ethical thing. If we're talking about ethics, surfing ethics, like that would be the more ethical thing to do. And if more people surfed like that, better surfers than me surf like that, then when I'm at a spot that's like in my challenge zone, and if there was someone in the water that has had 4 waves that I'm sitting a little bit on the shoulder because I'm kind of feeling nervous and I'm learning from them and I'm trying to figure out the positioning and I'm kind of nervous to go, and they look at me and they're like, hey, go. I'm going to be so stoked. It's like that paying it forward. Like we were all beginners. And I think that now the culture is I was a beginner and I suffered and therefore you have to suffer. But imagine that you could go back and be that beginner And the more experienced surfer was there to kind of support you and lend you a hand. And then you were the one paying that forward. Like, I don't know. It's such a utopian vision that doesn't exist, but we can create that if that's the conversation that starts happening. And you're right that there's going to be people that are not going to change. But, you know, I'm 45. Those people are getting older. Eventually, they're going to need knee replacements and hip replacements, and they're going to be on a longboard sitting on the shoulder. And it's the surfers that are learning to surf now that are going to make the culture going forward. So can we shift the conversation at least a little bit?
We definitely can. And again, I don't disagree. I think, you know, now that I'm older and I'm more inclined to surf the way you described, like, yeah. But it would be silly of me to expect others younger than me and hungrier than me to surf that way, is my point. And so, yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I think the problem is people don't talk enough in the water. There's too many surfers nowadays, and there's not the passive aggressive sort of old school way isn't going to work. There's just too many surfers for that to work, and it's just better to talk to people. If someone is acting like an idiot in the water, then it's up to one of the elder surfers to say something to them rather than just drop in and threaten to bust their fins out or whatever. I agree with that. But it is also up to the beginner surfers and the average surfers to have a little bit of respect for the history and the way that surf culture did evolve. We can't change that. And that some surf breaks, no matter how much you want them to change, they're just unlikely to change. So if you want to surf there, you just better be looking out for the scraps and working your way up to the point. Whereas there's going to be I'm sure there are places maybe even in Costa Rica where there's nothing but surf schools, and there's nothing but it's your turn, no, you go, and polite and longboards and soft. I'm sure there are places like that too. And it would be silly for even though there are some waves coming through that are very shortboardable, for some shortboarder to come through and try and rip through a bunch of longboarders learning. That would be silly of that person as well. Just like it would be silly of a learner to try and go out to First Point Malibu just because they could surf it because it's an easy wave to catch. It's silly for them to expect. Gosh, First Point Malibu is an incredible shortboarding wave. It was one of the most funnest waves to surf on a shortboard. That doesn't mean that you can go out there and sit at the peak, even if you lived there, even if you surf a longboard there every single day. You're not just going to grab a shortboard and go and catch a wave. You're going to get laughed out of the lineup, even though logically, you know, you're a local and you surf. It's just the way that the history and the culture of that break is, and there's no disregarding that. So I think we're far more in agreement than maybe this conversation has alluded to. I think just the nuance of every single break and every single swell is something that beginner surfers need to be more aware of. And maybe as surf coaches, we need to sort of talk about more. I always say, look, paddling up to someone, looking in the eye and talking about it is the way to go, no matter how angry they look or whatever. Maybe if they have a couple of teardrop tattoos under their eye, maybe don't, because you might get your tires stabbed. But otherwise, it's, you know, I think in a lot, surfing brings out the worst in people, especially when it's crowded. But I always find if you can be calm and look someone in the eye and have a conversation with them, maybe they get angry and paddle away from you, but then they actually might see you in the car park and come up and say, sorry, you know what? Hey, you know what? It was hectic out there. I'm sorry, I just ignored you when you tried to talk to me. Or what. I think you'll find most people give them the benefit of the doubt, and even if they're angry in the moment, they might disrespect you. But the next day you see them in the water, they might apologize, and people are willing to hear you out. Or it could backfire on you, and they might go, actually, you've been sitting on the inside, just getting in everyone's way. It would be far better if you just went down there and practiced your pop-ups. And you might actually end up with some, and then there's everything in between. So yeah, it's a good conversation to have. I always tell people to dive as much as you want to dive into surfing and getting better at surfing, dive into the surf culture and listen to Ain't That Swell podcast, listen to Surf Splendor podcast, follow the Raglan Surf Report and John Wayne Freeman on Instagram, and just really get a feel for
Wayne Freeman, come on.
Well,
I don't
the extremes.
No,
You're getting the extremes of surf
I know
culture.
what you mean, but I also think that the way to me, it's okay to surf culture to change, because if you just listen to what surf culture was from the beginning, back in when women didn't surf and it was so like women shouldn't be in the lineup, surf culture can change, and that's okay. Like when we teach it, I always teach, look, this is the history of surfing. These are where these rules came from. There's a lot, most of the people in the lineup are operating from these rules, but that doesn't mean that these are going to be the rules forever. And we can start in our own little world, our own little group, we can surf differently. And the more we surf differently and infect other people with surfing differently, then surf culture can change.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's important to know what came before, but I also don't think that that's the way that it should be forever.
I totally agree. And let's have the listeners out there chime in.
Yes, get ready for the comments.
Yeah. When I release this, there will be an Instagram post that goes along with it. So feel free to comment there. Write an email to myself, mike@surfmastery.com. You can go to Holly's Instagram page and chime in there. But I think it's important that the nuance of this conversation is had. I think that's the most important thing.
That's it.
Whether whoever's right or wrong, that's going to be nuanced to the specific surfing situation, I think. But the more we talk around it, the better informed you are to negotiate those situations. I mean, it's etiquette. At the end of the day, etiquette is sort of like a politeness thing, right? And some there's always going to be some people that do not give a shit about etiquette at all. So some of them will have teardrop tattoos, stay away from them, and some of them will be people that maybe it's not just their catching a wave experience that's driving it. Maybe they're trying to make the world tour, and there's no standing in a talented surfer who is driven because that's how they support their family financially. You're not going to having a conversation with them about catching.
Or maybe they just had a family member pass away in a car accident, or maybe they just lost their job. You never know. They just had a breakup. The way that I try to deal with, we'll call it something that appears to be a jerk in the water is, if you feel like your nervous system is up for the task and you feel safe to have a conversation, then do. And otherwise, I try to have compassion for that person. Because I at one point I was postpartum and I had 30 minutes to surf and I hadn't surfed, and I would go out there and be a complete jerk and catch too many waves for 30 minutes. So you never know what someone is going through and why they're being driven. But if you have a conversation with them and they tell you that they're more deserving of waves than you, because of this, and this, like, that's where I'm like, okay, let's discuss.
Well, no, that's an interesting point too. If you've been surfing a place for 20 years and you surf between 8 and 9 a.m. before your job, maybe it is okay if you catch more waves during that hour than the people that are there on holiday that can potentially surf that break for 4 hours a day.
For sure.
Yeah. And it happened.
One of my friends that I made in the water, we made friends because I had to get out it was 6 a.m. and I'd paddled out in the dark and I'd only had 40 minutes and I had to get out of the water to take my daughter to school, and I'd been trying to get one. And here comes this like amazing set wave and I dropped in on him. And I looked back and I was like, I'm so sorry. I have to get out and take my daughter for school. I know this is not okay, but goodbye. And we're like great friends now. And we laugh about it. And, the next time I saw him in the water, I'm like, hey, I think I owe you one. So you never know. You never know what's going on. And like you said, there's always going to be nuance. But if I just said, screw you, I live here, and that's why I'm taking the wave, and that's where it's not okay, not cool.
Yep, I 100% agree with that. And it is up to us to talk and, just to confront people with words in the water rather than passive-aggressive surfing antics. I think we're in agreement with that. And I think it's good that we have these conversations because, like you said, we're, as surf coaches, we're kind of informing the new ones coming in or the ones that are interested in learning more. So it's important that we have these conversations. So anyone else out there who's listening as a surf coach or an experienced surfer, please chime in.
Yeah. And then also teaching the kids, like my kids are learning to surf. My son's 9 and, we're having these conversations and it's hard because he's a frothy little guy. He wants to catch every wave that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, if you catch every wave that comes in, then people aren't going to like surfing with you. And when the good one comes, somebody's going to drop in on you. So go ahead and catch all the scraps, but that doesn't mean you also get the set wave. You either get to wait for the set waves or you catch all the scraps. You can't have both. And so, I think that I understand that energy from the young surfers, but I do still think that there's an opportunity to teach this other way of thinking. I could be like, no, I was a pro surfer and like, you're my boy. And, you were born in Costa Rica and you surf here. You've been surfing here since you were like in my womb. And that means that screw the tourists, you get to go. But that's not what I'm teaching him. And so it's like, it is the opportunity to, teach a different way.
Yeah. It kind of comes back to how we initiated this conversation a little bit, is your perspective on surfing and what you want out of surfing. If you want to be the next Kelly Slater, and you're going to be very isolated in your surfing experience because people won't want to surf with you. And so, like you said, if you're teaching kids to, hey, surf in a way where people want to surf with you. It's that simple, really. Like my kids are quite good at sports, and sometimes they get alienated at school because no one wants to play with them because they're too good. And I say to them, well, you need to play competitive sport in a way so that you get invited back to play again. So sometimes you want to pass the ball instead of score the goal. And I think
that was such a good analogy.
That kind of sums it up. If surf in a way where other people would like to surf with you.
Yeah.
Now when I go surfing and there's a really good surfer in the water and they catch twice the amount of waves as me, that's okay because I love watching them surf and the way that they negotiate the takeoff zone now if they're catching 10 times the amount of waves as me, then I'm like, nah, okay, come on, champ. I'm gonna push this issue a little bit. So there is a certain amount of nuance there again, but yeah, I think it's awesome that we have the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for being willing.
Yeah, of course, and hopefully we get some feedback and we can come at it again.
Sounds good.
Because etiquette is one thing, but then ethics, that's a whole nother conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Remind us of your website, Holly.
Surfwithamigas.com.
And what do you guys specialize in there?
Well, we're doing primarily women's, but we have all gender and family retreats. So it's like week-long experiences. They're all over the world: Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Mexico, Morocco, Panama, Peru, Indonesia. And it's definitely kind of from, even when we have the all gender retreats, it's coming from like a female perspective of like encouragement and support. And whether it's your first day surfing or you've been surfing your whole life and you just want to like dial in your tube riding with video feedback, everybody gets met at the level that they're at with the idea that they're worthy of catching waves, and we'll support them to achieve their goals. It's really fun.
Awesome. Can you spell the website for us?
Yeah, Surf with Amigas. So amigas means friends in Spanish. It's AMIGAS.
Perfect. And I will have links to that website in the show notes. And of course, links to your Instagram where people can chime in to this etiquette conversation. Go and check out Holly's website and her Instagram. Holly, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed our first conversation, so I knew that you were the right person to have this one with. Yeah,
no, it's a good conversation, and thank you for bringing it up, really, and having the nous to openly talk about it on Instagram, despite the black and white feedback that everyone loves to give on social media. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Yes.
I get like so irritated. At one point when I was like engaging in the conversation, I was traveling and I was like at the airport, the baggage claim, my ride was there, and I was like, no, I gotta finish this like response to this comment. So yeah, look forward to another round.
Yeah. Thanks, Holly.
All right, cool.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Surf Mastery podcast. It would be great to hear your feedback on this conversation and, of course, the topic in general. So you can email me, mike@surfmastery.com, but probably best if you engage on the Instagram post so that Holly can see as well. So that's @surfmastery. Chime in. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If there's anything that we missed or anything that we maybe got wrong, let's hear it. But as is the ethos of this podcast, I'm going to leave you guys with some tangible thoughts. I kind of summarize it as two things. If you want to surf with good etiquette, and even if you want to influence the etiquette of surfing culture in general, two things you need to be really aware of. First is you need to have good lineup awareness. Just as you might read the room, you've got to read the lineup. That will help you with your expectations of the level of etiquette. Some surf breaks are just simply not going to have much etiquette at all. It's unlikely to change. And then other surf breaks will have lots of etiquette, where there's surf schools around and nice gentle waves. So depending on what type of surf culture you want to be immersed in, so that's where you should be surfing. So choose wisely. If you happen to be a local at a place where there's a handful of surfers who show very, very low etiquette, of course you can lead by example and with calm conversations for those that stand out. There's a lot of young surfers that, like in the story Holly mentioned, like the red shorts person, he thought he was following the rules, and maybe he's just one of those people that people just let him get away with it. No one's ever said anything. I know I've had surfers talk to me about my lack of awareness in the lineup, and it's definitely changed my behavior over the years. So yeah, reading the lineup, having lineup awareness, and then of course having self-awareness is really important. I like the analogy of kids playing sports. If you're a kid and you're playing sport on a casual basis at school, then you want to play in a way where you get invited back to play. So surf in a way that people enjoy surfing with you. So yeah, lineup awareness and having self-awareness. I like the mantra of surf in a way that others enjoy surfing with you. Those are my thoughts. I would love to hear yours. Chime in on Instagram or mike@surfmastery.com. And we can get Holly back after some comments and some more thoughts on etiquette. Or if there's anyone else you think that would be a good guest to talk about surf etiquette or surf ethics or lineup politics, anything that's around this topic, please let me know, mike@surfmastery.com. And until next time, keep surfing.